So I did previously do a Twisted Fate and Gangplank deck right around when the new set first dropped, and it was pretty cool. It was really a gimmicky deck, you know, draw a bunch of fleeting copies of God knows what, get a bunch of kegs. I don't know. I don't really know what it was, but it was a fun deck to play. The link is going to be in the description of this video if you want to go check that deck out. But this deck I like. This deck is probably a more competitive version of Twisted Fate and Gangplank. And the biggest and best thing about this deck is Unyielding Spirit. So I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but all I can tell you is that Unyielding Spirit on a keg feels pretty good. All right, and we're going to get into that in the gameplay as well as the deck coverage right before that. So if this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Justin, also known as Shit Just Works. Do not forget to subscribe before you leave this video. And obviously, if you like the video, click the like button. So I won't keep it much longer. Let's get into the deck. All right, so real quick before we get into this, as always, the link to the deck and the deck code will be in the description below, as well as our podcast. So if you haven't checked out the podcast and you're into video games in general, not just Legends of Runeterra, definitely check out the podcast for myself and Roughhouse Plays. Link in the description below. All right, so now, let's get into the deck. As far as the beginning of the game, you do have tools to stave off other aggressive decks, mainly Make It Rain, as everybody knows, very good against aggro. Combo that with something like more Powder or a Dreadway deckhand, and you have yourself a pretty easy way to victory. I will say, Crimson Disciple is a pain in the butt. You basically cannot board clear with a Crimson Disciple unless you have a Make It Rain with a more Powder. So just something to take into consideration. That is also why there's Petty Officer in here. It does have the 3 attack, which can also block fearsome units. So that's another thing. Something like Precious Pet or a Skitterer from a Corinna controlled deck. Now, me personally, I do believe there's some other versions of this deck out there. I like to have more draw power. I want to draw into things like the Unyielding Spirit and the Riptide Rex and the Gangplank a little bit faster. So we have the Pool Shark in here. It also nicely combos with Twisted Fate, but that's not really the purpose. The purpose is to, again, get a little bit of extra draw, and in the aggro matchups, it will chump block at least one thing. It can also trade with, the Legion Saboteur, which is actually a very good trade for this card. We also have, as far as drawing, is Vanguard Redeemer. I love this card in this deck. You will almost always be able to get this triggered because of the kegs. That is one thing that you should know about this, is that the kegs do trigger Vanguard Redeemer, which is amazing. Vanguard Redeemer allows you to draw into pretty much everything a lot faster. You also have the Zap Spray Fin here as additional draw. So a lot of what you're doing early game, you're going to be drawing, all right? You also have Yordle Grifter, so you do have to keep an eye on your hand size. Yordle Grifter, I think it's a very underrated card. I think that in the right deck, i.e. this deck, Warning Shot is a very, very good card, mainly because it gets you your plunder effect from something like Riptide off, and can also level Gangplank very, very quickly. Like if he's at 3 out of 5 and your opponent's on an attack turn, boom, you Warning Shot in their attack turn, and then you Warning Shot before you drop them on your turn, and all of a sudden you have a leveled Gangplank. So feels really good to do something like that. Also feels very good to get the Warning Shot off prior to a Riptide Rex. Now, the coup de grace of this deck is Unyielding Spirit. So Unyielding Spirit plus a Powder Keg. Need I say more? All right, so it's just so good to get Unyielding Spirit on a Powder Keg. I will say, and you'll see this in one of the games that I have recorded, Wool of Ionia feels terrible. You know, it is what it is. There are ways to counter Unyielding Spirit, but there are a lot of decks that you'll play that will have zero way to counter Unyielding Spirit. In fact, we have Detain in this deck specifically to counter other Unyielding Spirit decks, as well as, just other decks with a unit that is very large or can't be killed that we need to take care of, because we can usually detain it with our Unyielding Spirited unit. It becomes very difficult for our opponent to get back, right? So, in addition to that, Unyielding Spirit on a Twisted Fate does not feel half bad. Why? Because you will basically guarantee his level up unless your opponent, like I said, Will of Ionia or whatever, But a Will of Ionia on a Twisted Fate feels a lot less bad because you'll get his effect to trigger again with one of his cards. Getting it on Twisted Fate isn't bad. Getting it on a Keg is the ultimate goal. There is only 2 in here. Getting it on a Keg plus Riptide Rex, that's the combo, all right? You drop a Riptide Rex with even 2 Kegs, maybe even 3. If you have 3 Kegs, that is technically a win if they have a empty field, right? That's 7 cannon barrages plus, oh no, God. All right, only 2 Kegs. Plus, I can't do math. 2 Kegs increases the damage from the 7 cannon barrages by 2 to the Nexus to equal 3. 3 times 7 is 21. I need my toes for that one too. Jesus, give me a break. So that's the ultimate goal of the deck. I'm not gonna talk anymore about it. Let's get into the 2 games. Alrighty. So first up, we are against definitely a different deck. It's odd. This is ranked, but it is Fizz and Lee Sin, I believe. I didn't catch that in the beginning there. It was definitely an odd matchup, but nonetheless, like I always say, I give him credit for doing an original deck. Instead of having to play Bannerman for the millionth freaking time. All right. Anyways, I can go on about that. So, all right. First up, you see we have a Keg. Now, we're going against a Bilgewater deck as well. Playing against a Bilgewater deck is definitely a little bit more difficult than usual, especially, honestly, this might be the hardest matchup because it's also paired with Ionia, which means they do have access to something like Will of Ionia. So, makes it kind of a hard matchup. The Make It Rains from your opponent are usually going to get your Kegs, and you're going to be in that game of like who's going to be the one to play the last card to be the first one to go off on the stack so that your Kegs actually go off. Obviously, my opponent's going to have Kegs as well, so it's just a very interesting mind game that you're going to be playing most of the game with the opponent. So in this particular matchup, what I'm trying to do is kind of, you see me play the Yordle Grifter. I'm getting these warning shots in hand because I want to try to focus on leveling a Gangplank at some point to get more Kegs on the field that they can't deal with. They can maybe deal with the first 2 that I put on from a Gangplank, but then they're not going to be able to deal with the extra ones I play, like from more Powder or one of the 2 drops, right? So in addition to that, there's Twisted Fate. So my champions overall have a lot more value in their level up than my opponent's champions. My opponent's champions are very aggressive, all right? Fizz and Lee Sin, once they're leveled, they're strictly meant to be the aggressor. He never actually plays the Fizz in this matchup, so I'm not sure how many Fizzes he's playing. A leveled Fizz does get you Chum the Waters, which is kind of like a control tool, but it's really, again, just meant for an end game, next turn attack with the Overwhelm. So what I'm trying to do is get my Twisted Fate and my Gangplank leveled so that I can begin utilizing them for card advantage over my opponent. I am going to need to play the Twisted Fate actively too to actually get him on the field and get him leveled. What I'm worried about here is now my opponent board clearing. You can see I have a Make It Rain with a Keg on the field, and I'm avoiding playing it because of exactly what I was talking about earlier. Like, I need to me and my opponent need to go back and forth with this mind game of who's going to be the first one to play it. It feels bad to get stuck with 2 Riptide Rexes in your first hand, I'm not going to lie, because you're really almost never going to be playing both of them. It's kind of like having 2 Ladroses in your hand, right? You can see he plays a Twisted Fate too. So at this point, all right, he plays a Twisted Fate. I play the Make It Rain. I'm going to lose my field anyways, even if he plays something else. Like, even if he didn't have the Kegs, I'm losing most of my field, minus the Gangplank, right? But I've already okay, my field's gone. It is what it is. He recalls the Keg. So there's the first Will of Ionia that you can see to prevent, basically, I don't know, I guess the Twisted and that other Plunder thing from dying. But I really don't think that was the right decision on his part because it leaves him with a really weak field. You never want to do that. When you are negating something that your opponent has, or at least if you're going to do that, you should do it with me having less mana, because I still had 5 mana left, which is enough for me to play Twisted Fate and then to red card. So just very questionable decision on his part to go ahead and kind of go all in on that Will of Ionia there. And I basically just play the Keg right back. That was a very bad turning point for my opponent. So anyways, now I get the Twisted Fate on the field. And again, I'm trying to stack up, getting these warning shots in hand, getting my Gangplank leveled, getting my Twisted Fate leveled if possible. You know, getting the Twisted Fate leveled is always hard. I mean, you can play it Unyielding Spirit on the Twisted Fate. It'll stick around a little bit longer. Obviously, in this matchup, that's probably not something that I want to do because he'll just end up recalling it. In most matchups that aren't Ionia, right? And there are some other factions like Demacia that could deal with it with like a Detain or something like that. But most matchups, you're not going to want to be playing Unyielding Spirit on anything but the Powder Kegs. But if you're playing a non-Demacia or a non-Ionia matchup, Unyielding Spirit isn't that bad on something like Twisted Fate. So he has his Twisted Fate on the field now, and now it's going to be kind of a race to see who can get the stronger, leveled up field at this point, whether it be a Gangplank or Twisted Fate or whatever. In his case, that's right, I totally forget he's playing Twisted Fate too. Twisted Fate, Lee Sin, and Fizz. So he's probably really hoping that he can level his Lee Sin ASAP, because Lee Sin will be a huge help to him in pretty much any situation at this point. So you can see here, when I summon the Vanguard Redeemer too, you can see how much work it's actually doing on this field, right? Like, I ended up yoinking that card, like Retreat, I think it is, from his deck, that I could actually pull back my Yordle Grifter and then summon that Vanguard Redeemer for only 1 mana, which made it even that much better. But you can just see a 3/3 body is not something to be just ignored, right? It's kind of why the freaking Badger Bear that everybody plays now at a 4/4 for 3 cost, that's why that's so good, because 4/4 is such a hard body to really get by. And a 3/3 is also pretty hard. Once you go from 2/2 to 3/3, the biggest difference is probably from 2/2 to 3/3. Then there's also a large difference from 3/3 to 4/4. So Vanguard Redeemer, also giving you that additional card. So basically your, Badger Bear versus Vanguard Redeemer. Badger Bear, you get +1/+1. The Vanguard Redeemer, you're getting a card. I would personally rather have the additional unit. That's just me. I don't know, whatever. So at this point, I'm trying to set up, and you can see my opponent actually played Unyielding Spirit because he yoinked my Unyielding Spirit, which I had a feeling the very first couple of turns when I saw him take so many cards, he must have had an Unyielding Spirit, right? So he played on Twisted Fate, which is not half bad for him considering he doesn't play the card. I drew my other Unyielding Spirit as fleeting, which feels really bad. And the problem here is that if I play, like, the Riptide is not actually, it wouldn't have actually killed him because, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody wants to correct me in the comments, but because the Twisted Fate is Unyielding Spirited, if the Riptide keeps hitting the Twisted Fate because it assigns targets randomly, it's not going to actually hit the Nexus because it's not killing the Twisted Fate. So it's just going to keep trying to damage the Twisted Fate and not doing anything. Feels bad, man. So I couldn't play the Riptide on this turn for the game. However, I did level up my Twisted Fate thanks to, I think, what the heck did I just play that drew? The Toss 2. Salvage. Jesus. So Salvage. That is why there's 2 Salvage in here, which I actually didn't go over in the deck overview. Salvage is meant to help assist with a Twisted Fate, like quick level up like that at the end of the game, if you do manage to get him to like 4, 5, or 6 out of the 8. And it also helps thin the deck to get your Riptide or your Unyielding Spirit a little bit faster. So, all right, game 2. So now we got Karma Ez. Everybody knows the Karma Ez deck. We know what's going on here. We know what the opponent's trying to do. So at this point, my mind is on basically racing and being aggressive as much as possible. So when I say racing, I mean trying to get to some sort of, not necessarily Unyielding Spirit with Riptide Rex, but some sort of high power, high damage output combo, right? So something like a leveled Gangplank with multiple kegs on the field with a couple warning shots, right? Into then a Riptide Rex, maybe on the following turn, just a Riptide Rex with no Powder Kegs on the field. So I'm not necessarily worried about Unyielding Spirit in this matchup, especially, again, because we're going against Ionia. So it's funny, the 2 games I ended up picking are against Ionia, and I did that because this is probably the hardest matchup for this deck. When you're playing against the Will of Ionia, it kind of negates part of your strategy, which again is the Unyielding Spirit on a keg, which feels super, super bad. And you can see here, I actually draw the Gangplank, and I kept the parlay. So now, with what I have in my hand, I have 2 parlays, right, and a warning shot. over the next 3 turns, I should be able to deal damage to my opponent's Nexus, right? So that health potion feels really, really bad, not going to lie, because I didn't do damage to the Nexus. But I am still going to be able to get the effect off on multiple turns. On Twisted Fate, I used the red card, does the 1 damage. Now I guarantee that I'm getting a proc on Gangplank's level this turn. Not sure why he decided to stun the Twisted Fate, because now what comes out actually gets damaged as well. It was kind of a weird decision to me. I don't know. Now I can also actually parlay one of them to get them off the board too. So another weird decision by my opponent to actually go in on that. And I think that's one of the things that's important about this deck is you're going to find your opponent not really knowing what the hell to do, because you have so many random different tools. It's crazy, right? You know, they're worried about like Twisted Fate, and then all of a sudden you drop a Gangplank. Like Twisted Fate and Gangplank are meant to kind of work together, but it's just very odd having to kind of prepare and plan around both of them, because they both do very different things. Twisted Fate more control-y, Gangplank more aggressive. And like I said at the beginning of this matchup, the Gangplank is something that I wanted to try to use to push damage, which you're going to see here. I think in a couple turns I actually end up playing the Gangplank to get the kegs. But again, same deal. I want to do the Make It Rain to try to prevent the lifesteal, get some extra damage, poke it through. Got the Make It Rain to hit the Nexus, so we also get another proc on Gangplank. And I think this turn, yes, see, so this is what I was talking about before. Now I can preemptively Warning Shot, play the Gangplank leveled up. I actually choose to attack here first because I did want to. I actually don't know why. I don't know why I attacked there first. I probably should have played the Gangplank first. That doesn't really make sense. Now, Riptide Rex here would have done 5 damage. So that is why, even though I could have used it for the Plunder effect, that is why I could not play Riptide Rex. He does have the Will of Ionia on my Gangplank, which also feels bad. So here's... All right, this is what kind of pissed me off with this. I Unyielding Spirit on the K. He already played 2 Will of Ionias. Like, there's not a very high probability he has a 3rd Will of Ionia, but he did, and it feels really bad because it would have been so nice to get the Riptide off with the keg right there. But you can see what the deck was getting at for that specific combo. I would have had the game next turn, no problem. Instead, we got to go with the Twisted Fate again. So we're doing some more AoE damage, and we're just going to end up getting the Riptide probably on the following turn, if I remember correctly, because we also do have a Powder Keg that we can utilize, which we are just going to drop back down right here. So that's the good thing about it, getting Will of Ionia. They are free, so it's not like you have to re-spend any mana to get them back down. So I do decide to go with the Powder Keg, or more powder, so that I still have 8 mana to get Riptide Rex off. Because I do have the Warning Shot in my hand. And you got to kind of do the math out early, because you got to keep in mind the Powder Kegs are going to go off with the Warning Shot. So that's 4 damage. Then the Riptide Rex goes off. And I know there's 3 units on the board. 4 will hit, units that are already dead, which means they'll do 1 damage to the Nexus. Math is a thing. So just make sure you're counting when you use Riptide Rex, because you can misplay that very, very easily and end up losing the game due to just not using all your fingers and toes. So make sure you know how to do math before you play this deck. All right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that deck. Honestly, another fun deck to play. Seems like it didn't do half bad in Platinum either. So if you are in Platinum, feel free to try this deck out. I highly doubt people will really know how to play against it, because it's a very odd deck list. It's also not a very publicized deck whatsoever. And it just feels so good to get Unyielding Spirit on a Powder Keg, man. I don't know. But anyways, as always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you. I hope you are watching the cast this weekend on the Duels of Runeterra #9 tournament. And peace out.